We're here talking today with Melanie MacDonald, a Brisbane property investor, and we're here to hear her story. So let's get started with how Melanie bought her first property and how she got into property investing. It's a very funny story indeed.
I didn't particularly know about property investing, which is actually probably an understatement. I grew up in a town where all the houses were owned by the company. It was a small town and they were company houses, and the houses that weren't company owned were just private owner occupiers. So I hadn't actually been exposed to any private rental property, and stupid as it might sound, I didn't actually know there was such a thing. So I graduated uni. I'd been boarding with people at university and things, so I knew that you could move into someone's house and pay them some rent, but I didn't know that you could actually rent out a whole house.
To strangers?
To strangers, yeah. Like, why would you do that? Let strange people in your house. And so I started my first job, and this was 1987, so for those people that were around then, the share market was booming, the property market was booming. Everybody was saying this is different from all the other booms, it's never going to stop. And people around me were starting to talk about making money out of property or shares or things like that. So they had this money expo thing at the convention centre, and there were all these different speakers about how to make $1 million in a week and things. So I thought, oh, this sounds cool. Oh, I'd like to do that.
So had you been to one before? Or this is the first time?
No, this is the first time. I saw it advertised in the paper, and seriously it said, you know, come along and learn how to make $1 million. And I was like, oh, I'd like to do that. So I went along, and there was a guy, and he said he would show you how to make $1 million out of real estate if you went to his seminar. And he was doing a 1 hour, I guess it was an introductory kind of a thing. So I went along and listened, and he said that he'd been earning $25,000 a year as a salary. And we're talking more than 20 years ago. And I was on $14,000 in my first job and working for the government. And so I even thought the $25,000 sounded good. I wasn't, worried about the rest. So I went along, and he said that what you could do is you could buy houses on big blocks of land, cut them in half, sell off the backyard, and then fix up the house, and you'd probably get the same amount for the house as you would for the house on the whole piece of land. So basically splitter blocks, but I didn't know what that was. And so he said that you could do this without, the bit that got me interested, he said you could do it without any money. And
did you have any money saved up?
No, so that suited me fine. That was perfect. Actually, I think at the time I had about $100 in the bank. But he said you didn't need any money, so that was fine. And he said something about using equity, but I didn't know what that was, and I didn't have any, so I didn't really take any notes about that. And he said, so you buy these houses with no money, sell off the backyard, make money, and away you go. So I thought, okay, I'll go and do that. So I left there, drove into town, and they had, in those days in New Zealand, they had a magazine called The Property Press, which was like a free thing that you picked up outside the real estate agent. It had all the houses for sale. So I'm looking through these houses for sale, and it said $96,000, renovator's dream, subdividable STCA, which didn't mean anything to me. Apparently that means subject to council approval. Apparently that's important. Ring up to buy it. And I went, oh, okay. That's what he described. It was a house that needed renovating. He said renovator's dream, so I thought it must be a really good house that needs renovating. Subdividable, exactly what I want. So I rang the agent, and the only things that I'd ever bought out of the paper up till then is I used to buy and sell budgies when I was a kid. I used to breed them. And I know, I was a pretty good budgie breeder. So I knew how to put ads in the paper, and I knew how to buy things out of the paper. And I'd bought my push bike, which I was riding at the time, in the paper as well. So I rang the phone number on the ad and said, hi, my name's Melanie, and I think I was 20 at the time, or 21. And my name's Melanie, and I am ringing about the ad that you've got in the paper of the house for sale. And it was the real estate agent, of course, on the other end of the phone. And he said, which one? And I explained, and he went, oh yeah. And I said, do you still have it? Because, you go to buy budgies, often they're gone before you ring. So he said, yes, we do. And I went, oh, great, can you hold it for me? I'll take it. And he said, don't you want to have a look at it? And I didn't know you could. And I said, yeah, okay. And he said, all right, well, I'll go and get the keys and I'll meet you there in about half an hour. And I went, oh, we're going to go inside? Because I didn't know. I mean, I presume someone would be living there. I didn't know you could just go into someone's house and, you know.
So you were prepared to buy the property without even setting eyes on it?
Yeah, because I read the ad and it was what I wanted. It was renovating and it was subdividable yard. And it really was perfect. You know, it was a long skinny block with a big backyard. It had, I reckon if you ripped up all the kitchen, you could put in, like it had cupboards. It didn't have an oven or anything like that, or a sink, but it had cupboards. I reckon if you pulled that out, you could put in a proper kitchen. If you tore up the carpet, you'd probably have enough non-rotten carpet to carpet one of the rooms. So I could just see this renovation potential. I went, yep, this is great, I'll take it. And the agent said, oh, okay, let's go back to the office then. So we went back to the office and he filled out the documents and he said, how much deposit do you want to pay? And I'd just been on the course in the morning and they said you didn't have to have a deposit. And so I said, oh, no deposit, thanks.
And what was his reaction?
He was a bit surprised. He said, oh, you have to have a deposit. I said, no, you don't, because I've been on this course. And he obviously hadn't been on the course. And so he said, oh, you have to have a deposit. You can't buy a house without a deposit. So he said, I think you should go and talk to a lawyer. But luckily for me, he had a friend who was a lawyer who was available on the Saturday afternoon. So don't try this at home either. I think you should get your own lawyer. And so we went and saw this lawyer, and the agent left me there with the lawyer, and the lawyer said, you know, what's happening? And I said, I want to buy this house. And he said, how much deposit have you got? And I'm like, he hasn't been on the course either. So I had to explain it to him, and he said, he said, oh, you can't buy it without a deposit. I'm not going to do the paperwork with you because you haven't got a deposit. So I took my documents, went back to the car, said goodbye to him. He said, you can't buy this house, you haven't got any money. Yeah. And I hopped back in the car and filled out the form. Then went back to the agent and he said, well, how much do you want to pay for this house? Which I thought was kind of weird because the price was in the paper. 96,000. And so I said 96,000. And he said, really? And I went, yeah, it was in the paper this morning. And I thought, this is really strange. Like, he can't even remember how much it is. Because I didn't know you could bargain for houses. Like, I knew you could bargain in the markets, you know, in Bali or something, but not for a house. I thought a house was a bit more professional than that. So I signed the forms for 96,000 and $100 deposit was what I filled in because that was all I had. And
so then you had to set about finding finance.
Yeah.
And that would have been quite difficult?
Yeah, 100% finance when you're 21 and you're earning $14,000 a year is a bit of a challenge.
Yes.
So I went to the first bank and said, I'm buying this house and, you know, I need to borrow $95,900. And the bank manager hadn't been on the course either. And he said, no, you need a deposit. And I said, I haven't got a deposit, but I've been on a course and you don't have to have a deposit. And anyway, he wouldn't help me. I was quite disappointed. So then I went to another bank and he said, okay, well, let's do the application form. And we got to the first question and he said, oh, is it Miss, Mrs. or Ms.? And I said, oh, it's Ms. And he went, oh, right, you're one of those. We don't lend to those. Remember, this was the 80s.
Oh, my goodness.
So that one didn't work either.
Wow.
So I learnt my lesson. I learnt not to say that anymore.
Yeah.
And eventually I found a building society that would lend me 80% of the value because they were sort of second-tier lenders and they weren't quite as strict as the banks. Yeah. And the interest rates in those days in New Zealand were, I think over here in Australia it was about 17%, and here it was, New Zealand was 23%. So first mortgage.
Wow.
So you probably get 21% if you went to a big bank, or 23% from second-tier lenders. So I got 80% mortgage at 23%.
So how did you get the remaining 20%?
Well, I saw this ad on TV that said, do you want to go on a holiday or buy a lounge now and you haven't got the money, apply for a credit card? And I went, oh, I could do that. Because I'd never had a credit card and my parents would have been appalled at the idea of me getting a credit card. And so I applied for 3 credit cards and got all of those. And I was still about $10,000 short. So I thought, the guy who ran this course, I must have missed something. I need to ring him up and ask him what to do.
So you got hold of him?
I did. I tracked him down, and funnily enough, he's working as an insurance salesman in the next town. And for a property millionaire, I was a bit surprised about that. So some flags probably should have gone up at that point. It's like, what, you mean the seminar brokers aren't all really millionaires?
So did he help you?
He did. Well, he didn't want to. He said, no, I can't help you, I'm too busy, and you know. And I just kept on and on at him, and he said, I'm really busy this week, because I had to settle on the Friday, but this was the Monday, so this 5 weeks have gone by and I'm still 10,000 short. And he said, I'm too busy today, I've got meetings all day. And I said, well, are you going to eat? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I'll come and talk to you while you eat. And in the end, he just gave up and said, right, come over then. And so I went and saw him, and took me to his lawyer. And she's got no idea what she's doing, but she is going to be fine because she's got the determination. So can you lend her the 10,000? So the lawyer lent me the other 10, fortunately, at 30% interest, mind you. And it was probably some little old lady's life savings that she's invested with a solicitor or something. So finally I had enough money and settled the thing.